For the last 39 years, I've had the privilege of living and working in a very exciting place, namely Silicon Valley in Northern California. I've worked for large companies and small. I've founded or co-founded 3 companies of my own, and I've invested in many others. Some of these have succeeded, some have failed. So I've had very broad exposure and up close to Silicon Valley for almost 4 decades. Many of the ideas I'll be sharing today with you are taken from my book, Unleash Your Inner Company. It's primarily a step-by-step guide for discovering, launching, and scaling the ideal business for you, starting with unsatisfied customer needs in areas you're passionate about. But the book also contains advice for policymakers, and that is the part that I'll be talking about today. Silicon Valley spans a distance of about 50 miles from San Jose to San Francisco. How many have been to Silicon Valley? Okay, many of us, great. Since about 2000, it's also expanded to the San Francisco, to include the South of Market or SoMa region of San Francisco. Here's a close-up view of the San Francisco Peninsula and SoMa, and some of the familiar names you'll find there. Of course, these are just the giant companies, the Googles, the Intels, Facebook, HP, Oracle, and so forth. For all of these are tens of thousands of smaller companies that are partners, suppliers, competitors, or investors, all in each other. Total employment of the region is about 3.5 million, of whom about 500,000 work in technology. 39 of the Fortune 1000 are headquartered here. I mark the start of Silicon Valley with the founding of Hewlett-Packard in 1939. Stanford and Berkeley, 2 major engineering universities, were also key to Silicon Valley's growth. Silicon Valley has grown and evolved over 8 decades without plan or design. No one could have predicted that semiconductors would give rise to mini computers, would give rise to PCs, networking, mobile devices, and so forth. Silicon Valley is a beautiful example of a complex adaptive system. Like a forest or a jungle or the human brain, no one planned it or designed it. It evolved. Order arises not by top-down design, but by tens of thousands of individuals and companies self-organizing for mutual benefit. Such systems are unpredictable. Arbitrarily small differences in initial conditions can lead to large differences in outcomes. They're dynamic. They're never at equilibrium. And finally, if you try to control them from the top down, you get unintended and often undesirable consequences. So, the companies split out from each other, they self-organize. For every success, there are many failures. Many experiments are going on in parallel, and that maximizes learning. The aggregate knowledge of the individuals and companies far exceeds that of any single decision maker or even small group of decision makers. There are many more small to medium successes than unicorns, and the success of these large and small companies together drives regional economic growth and distributes wealth very broadly throughout the region. And neither the winning companies nor even the industries can be predicted. Even most venture capitalists, who are very much focused on choosing the winners, only get 1 or 2 out of 10 investments right. So let's not deceive ourselves into thinking that it's easy to, or even probable to predict who the winners are. So let me suggest 2 sets of performance metrics by which any region can measure and manage its entrepreneurial effectiveness and attractiveness. The first focuses on ends, how many entrepreneurs are being created in or attracted to a region. And the second will focus on means, creating the right climate and environment that is conducive to entrepreneurship. So the first performance metric is this one. It's the number of, for a given set of entrepreneurs, or the set of entrepreneurs who are in a country, how many have entered during, say, a year period, minus how many have left that region for a 3-year period. This is actually a family of metrics There are different versions which give you different perspectives. For example, there are the different regions, countries, and provinces you can measure this for, and there are different regions, countries, and provinces that entrepreneurs move from into your region. So let's apply this to Poland. Here we see the number of entrepreneurs who are entering Poland for a particular period, and whether you choose 1, 3, or 5 years, is just a question of averaging, minus the number who leave Poland, divided by the number who stay in Poland for at least some reasonable period of time to get a business off the ground, say 5 years. So this metric, this ratio, ranges from at most +1 to -1. My sense is that right now for Poland, it's on the negative side. That is, more entrepreneurs are leaving Poland than joining, although I don't know for sure. I haven't seen the statistic cited anywhere. It's a very good one to track, and I encourage you to do so. I do know that I recently invested in a Polish company, Fido, that was based in Gdansk. It's a natural language processing company, and it moved its headquarters to Silicon Valley and reincorporated in the state of Delaware. So that would be one example of an outflow. Now here's a question. What would it take to move Poland into the positive category on this metric? How could we get entrepreneurs in the EU or Silicon Valley even saying, where we really want to be is in Poland? How could the tax, regulatory, and legal environment in Poland become so familiar and comfortable to US investors that it wouldn't matter to them that a startup was located here rather than in the US? Might startups here in Poland be governed by Delaware law, for example? I don't know, but it's worth exploring. How is Silicon Valley doing relative to this metric? Well, not as well as you might think. Yes, Silicon Valley is growing, and given its size and strength, it will continue to grow, but the growth has been slowing, and other technology regions in the US are now growing faster. So this is a map of the top 10 US state-to-state migration flows from 2010 to 2011. The largest one is from New York to Florida as baby boomers are retiring. The second largest is from California to Texas, and 4 of the top 10 are outflows from California. Only the number 10, the smallest of these 10, is an inflow from Texas to California. So let's look at that more closely. Here is US Census data on where people from California are migrating to. You can see that the top destination is Texas. And this other chart shows the major metropolitan areas in the US that have the greatest change in population, the top 10. And you can see that 4 of them are in the state of Texas. Namely Austin, Houston, San Antonio, and Dallas-Fort Worth. So on my metric of inflows versus outflows, Texas scores much higher than Silicon Valley does. Now, what makes Texas more attractive to more Californians? Well, it has no state income tax. It's one of only 7 US states that way, as compared to California, which has one of the highest US state income taxes. It has a friendlier regulatory environment in many ways that I can talk about at length. I started my first company in 1992, 25 years ago, and in that time I've been able to see how technology has made starting a company easier in most respects. Only in one way has starting a company gotten harder, in my opinion, in that time, and that is regulatory compliance. Now, I can offer many examples from personal experience, from worker status laws to visa limitations that affect hiring software developers from overseas to tax reporting. I believe this is the key reason that a lot of statistics show the amount of entrepreneurship in the United States has declined over the last few decades. So quite possibly, the right title for this talk should be How to Create Texas in Central Europe and Eastern Europe. And I believe Texas is a better role model for Central and Eastern Europe than Silicon Valley is. The second set of performance metrics I would recommend are the World Bank Ease of Doing Business indices. Here we see, as one example, the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index for Poland. The World Bank ranks 190 countries around the world from number 1 is the easiest to number 190 is the hardest to do business in. Here we can see that Poland ranks 24th best out of those 190 countries. And you can see here the detailed sub-performance metrics that comprise that overall ranking, such things as how easy is it to start a business or get electricity, get credit, and so forth. You can see that of all countries, Poland, to its great credit, ranks number 1 for trading across borders, so good for Poland there. You can see that it improved its rank by 1 position from 2016 to 2017. Good again. So here is an aggressive but achievable and very measurable goal for Poland. Cut your rank in half in the next 5 years. If we're currently at 24, set a goal to be at number 12 by 2022. That means improving by a rank of 2 to 3 positions each year. That's a very measurable and manageable goal. This will benefit all Poles, not just the entrepreneurs here. Improving rankings on the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index, my metrics number 2, is in marked contrast to much of what passes for promoting entrepreneurship today. These include government grants to selected winning startups, choosing target companies and industries and incentivizing those, short-term tax incentives, elevator pitch and business plan competitions, and free trips to Brussels. These activities are seductive. I've been part of all of them, either as a judge or an advisor. But I also know that this is not where the real work lies. I call this entrepreneurship theater. It makes us feel good and look good. But the benefits are primarily short-term and cosmetic. Not only is it impossible to choose winning companies and industries, when governments make the selections, political considerations typically intrude. Here's an example from the US. Solyndra, a Silicon Valley solar energy company, received over $500 million of taxpayer money from the US Department of State and the state of California before declaring bankruptcy in 2011, none of which that $500 million was recovered. All of that in our eagerness to invest and support solar energy. So don't expose Polish taxpayers to this kind of Russian roulette. So what can Poland do instead? Here are some suggestions. Aim for the lowest tax rates in the EU and in the world. You're competing for entrepreneurs not just with the EU, but with the entire world. Aim for the latest regulation in the EU and in the world. Sunset regulations refers to automatically eliminating a regulation after 5 years or requiring that it be reevaluated after 5 years to make sure it still makes sense. Free trade and no trade barriers help build ecosystems. Having the most efficient administration in the EU and the world is very good. And don't try and pick and reward winners, but rather create attractive environment and climates for all entrepreneurs and industries. A single anchor tenant does not an ecosystem make, and we cannot know what companies will be needed to be part of an ecosystem. So we need to be attractive to everyone. I've had a chance to briefly review the very thoughtful Polish development plan of Minister Morawiecki. And some things in it I very much like. such as eliminating bureaucracy and regulation. Other parts of it I would have questions about, such as our ability to plan the economy of Poland from the top down. And I can offer some details, and I'd be happy to talk about that further after the end of the session. The same World Bank metrics and goals apply to all other countries in Central and Eastern Europe. So here are the rankings on the World Bank 2007 Ease of Doing Business Index for the countries in our region, starting with the best, Macedonia, and going through Bosnia, Herzegovina at 81. And here is what I would propose would be aggressive but achievable goals for each of those countries, again, to cut their rank in half in the next 5 years. Again, everyone in those countries and this region, not just the entrepreneurs, will benefit from this goal. In summary, to create Silicon Valleys in Poland and Eastern Europe, use metrics, focus on creating the most attractive tax and regulatory environments in the EU and the world, and empower and trust in individuals, startups, and businesses to self-organize, grow, and flourish. Thank you very much.